Hey everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to be back. Wow. I got a lot to talk about, as you can imagine. It has been an eventful few days, to say the least. And wow, where do we begin? Well, we can start with the opening music.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I'm finally starting to feel normal again. My body was doing all kinds of crazy things and staying up late and sleeping very little and making sure one thing was taken care of and making sure another thing's taken care of. But now I am back in a state of equilibrium. I went to the gym and I exercised today and I sweat and I did some reporting for RT and oh my goodness, I'm in a great spot. I am in a great spot. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And the way we do things here on these streams, for those of you who may not be familiar, the way we do things is I give my opening remarks, and then after I give my opening remarks, we do the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then after that, I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you would like for me to talk about in the second half of the show, just like Mr. Tunu did with the super chat that was just sent, by all means, send me a super chat. I will write it down, and in the second half of the show, we'll talk about it. And it'll be awesome. Folks, I am coming out of a weekend that was awesome. The Center for Political Innovation, we had our first public event in a long time. And did anyone show up? Oh, hell yes, they did. The room holds 100 people. It was a 100-people room at the hotel in Washington, D.C., and they started calling me. They said, Caleb, I'm waiting to get the all clear from security to come in. And they're like, Caleb, we're running out of chairs. And they call me, Caleb, we're at 150 people. Caleb, we just surpassed 150 people. We just surpassed 150 people. And I'm like, oh my goodness, are we going to have to start turning people away? I said, let's make sure at least our speakers are there. Let's make sure at least the people that we have speaking are all there. But oh man, we didn't have to turn anyone away, but it was standing room only. There was well over 160 people in that room. And we ate veggie dogs and beef dogs and pretzels. And it was awesome. It was awesome. And the guest of honor, of course, was Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter was barred, pushed out basically of giving a speech at the rally, at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. So because he was pushed out, the Center for Political Innovation, we stepped up to the plate. Oh, that's a good one. We stepped up to the plate, and we we gave Scott Ritter a platform. That video is about to be posted. It is being uploaded as we speak. It's being exported and sent to me. I know videos never come quick enough, but we have, a very professional camera crew there. Shout out to our camera guy who does great work for us. Peter is a great guy, and it's about to be uploaded. And but this moment, I cannot watch this video enough times. Wow, you had to be in this room. If you're watching this, you're going to watch this clip right now, 29 seconds, but you had to be there. It was something, but you get a sense of it in this clip. This was the hero's welcome that Scott Ritter got from the Center for Political Innovation.
This is a hero. This is a hero right here. We love you, Scott. We love you. Go ahead and give us some words.
Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. To be honest, I thought I was just coming here to a reception to say hi to people, and speaking is, hopefully it's a bonus. Listening, first of all, thank you.
Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. But I mean, look at the beginning of it again. Like,
this is a hero. This is a hero right here. We love you, Scott. We love
if you look at that clip, there's Gavin. Gavin is really getting into it. If you look at this clip, right? Gavin is there, and he is really into it. Look at Gavin there. Gavin is, he's just so into it. Turn off the music. Look, there's Gavin. He's like standing in the aisle. He's so into it. Scott. He's pumped. And there's, and then he walks in, and there's Noah who shakes his hand. Right? Noah shakes his hand as he walks on in. Oh man, it was something else. You had to be in that room. Noah did a great saxophone performance. Yeah, I mean, it was something. It was really, really something. You had to be there. Scott Ritter, our guest of honor, spoke. The Uhuru movement were there. The Uhuru movement, put them on, right? I'll just show a brief clip from the Uhuru movement. The Black revolutionaries who are under attack by the FBI. They spoke, and they were great. Wow. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, it was really, really something special. This event was really, it was really, really great. The Center for Political Innovation is back. We are back in business, and we are going to be back in Washington, D.C. in March. If you want to come to our conference in March, by all means, sign up. Link is down below. I will drop the link in the chat also for those of you who may not see it. But the Summit Against Hypocrisy, our Center for Political Innovation answer to Joe Biden's democracy summit, his so-called democracy summit, which will be nothing but an anti-China, anti-Russia, anti-Venezuela, anti-Cuba, anti-Iran shit show. We are going to have our Summit Against Hypocrisy. And so sign up to attend that. And it's going to be really an important event. It's going to be a really, really, really important event that we have. And so thank you, everyone who worked hard. I know Elizabeth worked really, really hard to make this event happen. Olympia Logic worked really, really hard. Brian, the music was amazing. I mean, the music that we played, wow. Brian worked really, really hard on the music, and Paul and Jonathan Blazer played great music as well. And the guests we had, and it was really, really great. It was really, really something amazing. It was really, really an awesome event. And to have the Uhuru movement, a group of Black revolutionaries, be there and raise their case about what the FBI is going after them. That was really, really powerful and important. And to have, other friends, Convo Couch, we had Pasta from Convo Couch. He was there. That was really, really awesome. And we also had, other folks, Fox Green from Space Commune. He was there, and it was really, really great. And it was, we attended the actual rally, the Rage Against the War Machine. Elizabeth, the president of CPI, she spoke to the rally. She gave a very rousing speech. We're trying to find it. A lot of people were filming her speech. It was on a lot of live streams. We're trying to find the video. We're trying to track down the video of Elizabeth's speech before the rally, at the closing rally at the White House. I'll show you the picture of Elizabeth's speech. So if anyone who's a web volunteer wants to go look through video footage from the rally, that would be awesome if you can help us track down Elizabeth's speech, because we really ought to put it on the CPI YouTube channel. We didn't have our own video of it, but I'll pull up the picture of Elizabeth speaking. I'll pull up that picture of her speaking. There we go. And we'll share the screen. And if someone can help us find the video from a live stream, that would be awesome, because Elizabeth was awesome. She was really tremendous, and her speech was fire. It was great, and it inspired so many people to pile into our event. Right? This is Elizabeth speaking at the rally at the White House. There's Elizabeth. She's on the microphone, delivering a powerful speech about anti-imperialism and unity. Really great. There's Olympia Logic filming her, and we had somebody else's filming. So if anyone can track down a video of Elizabeth's speech, that would be awesome, because we'd really like to post it. That would be awesome. Fox Green was awesome. The Korean Friendship Association, Alex from the Korean Friendship Association was awesome. It was really great. It was really awesome. It was a really great event. It was really awesome. Really great. And I can't be happier, really. The other night, just last night, I was on Maverick News with Lori Spencer. We did a great summation. Tyler McConnell, who is on the board of directors of CPI, and myself and Lori Spencer and Rick of Maverick News. We had a great summation. Go and watch that. I posted the bulk of that on the YouTube channel already. So yeah, this was a win. This was a win. This was a great moment. It was a great moment, and we're gonna have more video soon. More video is coming soon. Plenty of video. I gave a presentation. That's up. There is a small clip from my presentation that's been posted. It's on obscure YouTube. You can track it down, but I don't want to post it yet. I'm just going to post my full presentation. I don't want to ruin anything for you. Oh yeah. And of course, shout out to Ryan. We're going to interview tomorrow night, Ryan Cotton, the man with the flag. He's become famous. He's now a member of the Center for Political Innovation. Ryan Cotton is now famous. He's the man with the flag because he was walking around. He brought a Russian flag with him. And so he's in a lot of videos, and he's at the center of all this controversy. We're going to bring him on this channel to give his side of the story. That's going to be awesome. That's going to be great. It's going to be great. So yeah, I am thrilled. I am thrilled. And so I thought for tonight, for my opening remarks, I would try to get you all to understand that the life of a revolutionary is an uphill battle. The life of a revolutionary is not a straight line. There's a book that Lenin wrote. Steps forward, back. I want to get the exact name of the title. One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, I believe it's called. Yeah, one Step Forward, Two Steps Back by Vladimir Lenin. About how in the life of a revolutionary, you advance, but sometimes you have shortcomings. I have never actually been to a traditional Jewish wedding. Right? I've seen them in movies many times. But one thing that they do at traditional Jewish weddings is, I've seen it in movies, is when they declare the couple to be married, they have a glass and they stomp on the glass and the glass shatters, right? And I was talking to somebody about why that was. I did not know the purpose of that tradition. And they explained to me that the reason that traditional practicing Jews stomp on a glass at the wedding, the reason that they do that, it's because there's a feeling that in good times, like a wedding, one should remember the sad times as well. And in the sad times, one should remember the good times, right? And it's about about kind of at that wedding, in that glorious moment where the couple have just gotten married. They stomp the glass as to just remind everyone about the hard times that have come along the way. That's what they do. Oh, I've got another super chat here coming in from the Rockfin. Did you see Sabi Saab's interview with World Socialist website guy? Did you see Sabi Saab's with WS? Okay. All right. Wrote it down. Thank you, Chris Leon, for the super chat. Much appreciated. But that's why they do that at traditional Jewish weddings. That's why they do that. Is that the idea is to remember the hard times, when you have a good time. And it's interesting because right now in the world, that's not particularly difficult because we had a successful event. We had a big anti-war protest despite hell and high water. They did everything they could to prevent this rally. They convinced the leftists that it was all a racist rally. They convinced the libertarians that it was all a big rally to support Russian war crimes and pedophilia. And, and they incited all the speakers against each other and they stirred up drama. But this still was an amazing rally. So that's a step forward. But it's at the same time, I mean, the backdrop is the danger of a new world war. That's the backdrop. So, we celebrate that we had a successful event. We celebrate that CPI had a huge comeback, live event. But we also have to remember the backdrop is that we're entering more serious times where our work is becoming more necessary and our actions have bigger implications than we can imagine. This is all very, very important. But the life of revolutionaries, it's not just like you just keep marching ahead. There are setbacks, but you have to overcome those setbacks. That's the point. You have to overcome those setbacks. That's what you have to do. You have to overcome those setbacks and you have to march ahead. And so tonight, I thought to kind of change the subject from the rally, but to kind of help us frame and put the rally and put the comeback of the Center for Political Innovation into proper context. In order to do that, I thought I would tell you all about the life of a man who I consider to be probably one of the greatest Americans, one of the greatest human beings in American history. This man, William Z. Foster. This man was the American communist. He was the leader of the American communists during the Great Depression, during the 1950s McCarthy period, the leader of the Great Steel Strike of 1919. This man was the American communist. He was Mr. Communism in America, William Z. Foster. But if you look at the life of William Z. Foster, it's a life full of great victories for the working class, great achievements, but also great hardships. Great hardships and great setbacks. And let's just go over his life, because if we're going to be serious revolutionaries, we got to understand that it's not all one giant walk forward. When we have a victory, it is a great feeling. I love that communist song from Canada. They have the chorus. So we won another battle, watch the enemy fall, but don't it seem paltry, but don't it seem small. Still the enemy besets us and blocks our advance. But the times cry out, here's the rose, now dance. And actually that line, here's the rose, now dance, that comes from Karl Marx. Comes from critique of it comes from the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. And I will read you the passage, because that passage from Marx where he says that is even more telling. And I'll read you what Marx wrote. This is what he wrote in in 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. I'll just read you that passage because the passage makes it even more clear. Makes it even more clear. Here we go. He wrote, bourgeois revolutions like those of the 18th century storm more swiftly from success to success. Their dramatic effects outdo each other. Men and things seem to set in sparkling diamonds. Ecstasy is the order of the day, but they are short-lived, and soon they have reached their zenith, and at long takes hold of society before it learns to assimilate the results and storm a less stress period soberly. On the other hand, proletarian revolutions, like those of the 19th century, constantly criticize themselves, constantly interrupt themselves in their own course, and return to their apparently accomplished in order to begin anew. They deride with cruel thoroughness the half measures, weaknesses, and paltriness of their first attempts. They seem to throw down their opponents only so they may draw new strength from the earth and rise before them again, more gigantic than ever, recoil constantly from the indefinite colossalness of their own goals, until a situation is created which makes all turning back impossible, and the conditions themselves call out, "Here's the rose, now dance." That's the quote from Karl Marx, saying that proletarian revolutions are not as quick and dramatic. The French Revolution, very quick and dramatic. The English Civil War, very quick and dramatic. The American Revolution, very quick and dramatic. But the process of the working class majority becoming the masters of society is a process that involves advances and setbacks and advances and advances and setbacks until ultimately it reaches a critical moment where there is no turning back. And that is an important thing. That is an important thing to remember. So William Z. Foster. William Z. Foster was a working class kid from Philadelphia. He was from a family, I think it was something like 12, 13 children, Irish Americans. And he had a lot of different jobs in his life. He was the assistant of a sculptor. He was a trolley driver at one point. He was a longshoreman. He worked on ships. William Z. Foster was a great organizer. And it was in the Pacific Northwest. I believe it was in Seattle. One day he was walking to work. There was a man on a soapbox preaching socialism on his soapbox. And William Z. Foster stopped and he listened to the man on the soapbox who was preaching socialism, and he argued with him. By the end of the conversation, William Z. Foster was convinced that the workers should control the means of production and that socialism was the answer. So he joined the Socialist Party, and he joined the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. He became a socialist. And as a socialist, he organized and he was involved in the great Spokane free speech fight. People know about the Spokane free speech fight. This is a really important event in the history of Marxism in America. And all this stuff gets put down the rabbit hole. The city of Spokane, Washington. It's a small town in Washington State. The city of Spokane, Washington, it basically forbid people from preaching socialism. It forbid people from preaching socialism. And so thousands and thousands of socialists from around the country, wobblies and anarchists and others, piled into Spokane, Washington. You can read about it here. And they intentionally got themselves arrested, violated the injunctions that forbid preaching socialism. And one by one, they got arrested and put in jail, demanding the right of free speech. One by one. And the town's jails were full of people. And they took the schoolhouse of the town and they turned the schoolhouse into a jail. and it was freezing cold. And William Z. Foster was one of those who got arrested and held in the schoolhouse with no heat, fighting for the right of socialists to speak. And it was a historic moment, the Spokane free speech fight. And William Z. Foster, he was part of the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies. He was also part of the Socialist Party. But he realized that the Wobblies, the IWW, this very radical, anarchist, socialist labor union, they had a problem, which was that most American workers who were in unions were not in the IWW. They were in the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. And so William Z. Foster realized that the IWW, it wasn't going anywhere because they had this radical, ultra-revolutionary union. But most American workers who were in unions were not in the AFL or in the IWW. They were in the AFL. And so William Z. Foster, he realized if they wanted to spread socialism to the majority of American workers, they had to leave the IWW and they had to go into the existing unions. They had to join the American Federation of Labor. And he came up with a slogan he called boring from within, right? The word bore, it means like you drill a hole, right? You bore a hole in something. And he said we have to go into the reformist AFL and we have to bore from within. And the leaders of the IWW, they thought he was a revisionist. And they thought he was a sellout. You want to go join the reformist labor union? You want to go join the, you want to go join this labor union that's not revolutionary, that votes for Democrats and Republicans. And he said it's the right thing to do because that's where the workers are. You can't imagine what they must have said about William Z. Foster when he and his group of followers quit the IWW and joined the AFL. They must have called them phonies and sellouts and revisionists and opportunists, and they must have been called every nasty name possible. But William Z. Foster realized that the IWW's strategy of building a communist-controlled union that was isolated, it wasn't going to work. And he realized that it was necessary to get to the masses. To get to the masses of people. Only the masses of people in their millions can make a revolution. And the Wobblies were a good group, and they did good activism for free speech, and they did good activism on the job for immigrant workers and for workers who wouldn't be unionized by the AFL, who the AFL considered to be unskilled, or because they didn't speak English, or they were foreign born, or whatever it was. The IWW was a good union, but if they were going to make a revolution, if they were going to make a working class revolution, they needed to go into the existing labor unions. And so he and his supporters, they packed up and they joined the AFL. That was a big move. And it was a tough decision to make, but it was what needed to be done. It wasn't easy. It might have felt more revolutionary to be in the IWW. Might have felt more fulfilling to be in this radical communist anarchist labor union, but it wasn't a winning strategy. They were losing. And William Z. Foster understood that in order to win, we had to get to the broad masses of Americans. And that meant breaking out of the IWW and forming a communist faction in the AFL. So William Z. Foster and his followers, they quit the IWW and they formed the Syndicalist League of North America. And they joined the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. And then what happened? What happened then? World War I broke out. And World War I was a horrendous war. And, 20 million workers were sent to their deaths. And the government used World War I to completely smash the Socialist Party, and completely smash the industrial workers of the world. Eugene Debs, the leader of the Socialist Party, was thrown in prison for opposing World War I. All kinds of socialist leaders, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and others, were put in prison for opposing World War I. There was a worker who was lynched, Frank Little. was a socialist leader in Seattle who was lynched because he was opposed to World War I. A mob of pro-war people lynched Frank Little. Yeah. And the socialist movement was being crushed. And so, because of that, because the socialist movement was being crushed, they had to make a decision. And if you got up and you spoke against World War I, they threw you in jail. And there were socialists who heroically did that. William Z. Foster was not one of them. Eugene Debs, he did that. He was thrown in prison. And Elizabeth Gurley Flynn was thrown in prison. And a lot of socialists went to prison for opposing World War I. And there's a Supreme Court ruling, Schenck versus the United States. There was a guy in New York City who handed out leaflets, to people outside the draft office saying, don't fight. And they threw him in prison. And the Supreme Court said, yep, he can go to prison for that. That's not free speech. It's like shouting fire in a crowded theater. And they threw him in prison for that. And so William Z. Foster, as the leader of the Syndicalist League of North America, a group of radical labor unionists who had joined the American Federation of Labor to try and spread communist politics inside the AFL, they had to make a decision. They said, World War I is happening. Are we going to publicly come out against World War I? And of course they were against it. William Z. Foster was definitely against World War I. So were all of his allies. They were against World War I. But if they were against World War I, they would all go to jail. And their organization would be crushed. And so they made a strategic decision. In order to keep infiltrating the American Federation of Labor and pushing it toward communist radical politics, they were in Chicago. They were running the Chicago wing of the AFL, the Chicago Federation of Labor. In order to push it more radical, in order to maintain their ability to keep boring from within, they voiced support for World War I. And of course, they didn't actually support World War I. And of course, they raised money for Eugene Debs, to support Eugene Debs, and to support the socialists who went to jail for opposing it. But they understood that it was their job to maintain influence in the American Federation of Labor. So they strategically didn't protest World War I while giving support to other people who did. That's a principled decision. All right. Imagine how difficult that was, to see that so many of your comrades are going to jail for opposing World War I, to see how awful World War I is, and to want to support your comrades, but at the same time realize that if we're going to have any power as a labor movement, we're going to have to, to some degree or other, support World War I. And so William Z. Foster and his friends in the AFL, they pretended to support World War I. And because they pretended to support World War I, they were able to maintain their faction. And they took control of the Chicago wing of the American Federation of Labor. And they organized the Meat Packers of Chicago. The Meat Packers of Chicago were organized into a union. And it was illegal to have a strike during the war. And so what they did was that they had these public meetings to expose the cruelty of the packing house owners. They had children testify about the child labor. They had families testify about the low wages. They testified about the gross conditions of the meat and the bugs. And they used these public forums. They had these public events where they invited newspaper reporters and all kinds of people. And they exposed the conditions in the packing houses. Just exposed what it was like. If you've ever read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, it describes the conditions of packing house workers and meat packers and meat packing workers. I mean, they suffer, it was awful conditions at this time. And so William Z. Foster used a public forum to expose how these immigrants from Eastern Europe and from Ireland and how these African Americans who'd come up from the South, how they were being treated in the meat packing facilities. And by doing that, That humiliated the bosses and the employers, number one. And then on top of that, they passed out leaflets. They never said they were going to go on strike, but they hinted that there might be a strike. Now, a strike would have been completely illegal, but if there'd been a strike in the meat houses of Chicago, that would have been a national disaster because the war was going on and they needed to send meat to the soldiers in the war, and they were already rationing things for the war effort. And because the government was afraid of having a wartime strike, and because the bosses were humiliated, showing, the conditions to the whole world of how they treated the people in the stockyards and the meat houses, William Z. Foster unionized, and he won a union for the meatpacking workers of Chicago. That was a huge step forward. And on top of that, that union was controlled by communists. It was controlled by the Syndicalist League of North America. His communist buddies, him and Bill Dunn and Jack Stachel and Jack Johnstone, it was communists who controlled the Stockyards Labor Council. So they unionized, they created a union. They created a union for the stockyards of Chicago, and that was a communist-controlled union. And then World War I came to an end. And so then William Z. Foster, he went to the leaders of the Chicago Federation of Labor, and he says, let's strike the steel industry. Let's have the steel workers go on strike. Has anyone ever worked in a steel mill? The hot metal it's a dangerous job, and it's hot and it's miserable. Making steel is not an easy thing to do. Nowadays, a lot of it's done by machines, but back then it was done by a lot more human labor. Technology had not developed. And there were steel mills in Pittsburgh, and there were steel mills in Chicago, and there were steel mills in Minneapolis, and there were steel mills in Cleveland and Detroit, and steel mills were not a pleasant place to work, and it was mainly workers from Eastern Europe, and it was mainly workers from Ireland and Italy who were working there, and they were miserable. And William Z. Foster, he went to the leaders of the Chicago Federation of Labor. He said, let me organize the steel workers. So he got the money together and he got the resources. And in 1919, they had the Great Steel Strike of 1919. 365,000 steel workers went out on strike to demand union recognition. And it was huge. All over the country, steel workers, the World War I had just ended, and all over the country, steel workers were on strike, demanding a union. And the leader of the union was William Z. Foster, and they called him before Congress. They had a congressional investigation of the strike. And they called William Z. Foster up to the stand, and they had his anarchist pamphlet, his revolutionary anarchist pamphlet from back when he was a wobbly. And they read it out loud. They said, do you still believe this? You still want a revolution? And he said, no, I was young once. I was young and radical, but I've grown up. Oh, I supported World War I. Look at me. I raised money for World War I. And he was lying, but it's what needed to be done. And, he pretended he wasn't radical anymore. He said, look, I raised money for World War I. I sold war bonds. And, oh, no, I'm not a radical anymore. I'm not an extreme. I just want a leader of the Steelworkers Union. Just want a fair deal for the steelworkers. Woodrow Wilson called William Z. Foster to the White House and urged him to call off the strike, and spoke to him in what he describes as roughneck talk to try and convince William Z. Foster that the strike was bad for the country or something. William Z. Foster didn't call off the strike. It was big. And the National Steel Strike. And there were battles. The Ku Klux Klan was called out to fight strikers. The National Guard was sent out. Workers died on the picket line. And the radicals didn't support the strike because it was led by the American Federation of Labor. And they said, well, that's a sellout union. The AFL, that's no good. The AFL is not a revolutionary union. So some of the more radical forces didn't support the strike. And they lost. They lost. The 1919 steel strike failed. They lost. And do you know why? Do you know why they lost? What was the major factor in causing the steel strike of 1919 to fail? Racism. It was racism. Because the union that William Z. Foster was the leader of, the American Federation of Labor, was whites only. It was a whites only union. And so when the steel workers went out on strike demanding union recognition, what did the employers do? They hired black people. And black people had no problem working as replacement labor because it was a racist union, right? The union was what prevented black people from working in the steel mills to begin with. So when the union was on strike, the black people said, look, this union's racist and discriminates against us. And they had no problem, and so William Z. Foster learned from that strike that racism is the great enemy of the working class. And that if the black workers had trusted the union and been in the union, if the union had put forward the demands of the black workers, they probably would have won the strike. But because racism had infected the American Federation of Labor, and because it was a whites-only union, the bosses were able to manipulate the situation. And the strike failed because of racism. That was an important moment. The capitalist bosses saw that the AFL was a racist union, and that was a weakness. And that broke the solidarity of the workers, and they used the racial divisions as a method for making sure that the steelworkers union failed. And so it failed. The strike failed. William Z. Foster was out of a job. The steelworkers union was no more. He wasn't employed by the Chicago Federation of Labor anymore. His buddies were all out of there. The AFL kicked him out. They kicked them all out. They were out. William Z. Foster was out on his butt. Can you imagine how that must have felt to be out on your butt after that? You unionize the packing houses. You unionize the steelworkers. You lead the biggest strike, one of the biggest strikes in American history, but you lose. And then you're out of there. He went to work. He went back to work on the railroads. He became a car knocker. So they called them car knockers. They were guys who, when a train car would go off the go off the tracks or something, they had guys who had big hammers, and their job was to fix the train car so it could get back on the tracks. They called them car knockers. William Z. Foster was a car knocker, and he had a big hammer, and he went back to work as a car knocker. He was no longer employed by the labor movement. He lost the strike. The Communist Party called him Easy Foster. Easy Foster instead of William Z. Foster. Said he was weak. He'd lost the strike. Imagine how William Z. Foster felt. They lost this big strike. He was hated in the American labor movement. They called him a sellout for supporting World War I. Must not have been a good time for William Z. Foster. 1920 was not a good year for William Z. Foster. They lost the great steel strike of 1919. Not a good time. But then, because William Z. Foster had been the leader of this huge strike and led 365,000 workers out on strike, and because of the fact that Lenin and the Bolsheviks were very smart and strategic, even though William Z. Foster was not a member of the Communist Party, even though William Z. Foster had been part of the American Federation of Labor, even though William Z. Foster had publicly said he supported World War I, one day he got an invitation. Some folks from the Communist Party came to visit William Z. Foster, and they said, "We're having a conference in the Soviet Union of labor union leaders from around the world. We want you to come to the conference." And William Z. Foster was invited to go to Moscow. So he got on a boat, went to the Soviet Union, and he went to this conference for the Revolutionary International of Trade Unions. There were labor leaders there from all over the world. And Lenin invited William Z. Foster to come talk to him in his office. William Z. Foster and Vladimir Lenin talked for a long time. And when he was in Moscow, William Z. Foster found out that the whole time his strike was going on, Lenin had been urging the American communists to support the strike. And just like William Z. Foster had said, that we have to bore from within, we have to go into the reformist labor unions and build a revolutionary faction within them. Lenin had told the American communists they should do that. Well, they wouldn't listen. And William Z. Foster realized that the Bolsheviks and their methods of organizing, boring from within, agitation, propaganda, these were the same methods that his Syndicalist League of North America had been applying. And based on having conversations with Vladimir Lenin, and based on realizing that the Soviet Union was a successful revolutionary country where they were building socialism, William Z. Foster came back to America and he joined the Communist Party. The Communist Party, they had their unity convention. There had been the Communist Labor Party and the Communist Party and the Revolutionary Committee of the Socialist Party. And there were a lot of different groups, but 1922, they had the unity convention and William Z. Foster was in the Communist Party. And William Z. Foster, the leader of the 1919 steel strike, became the labor union leader of the Communist Party of the United States. And that was a big deal. Right? Hadn't he just gotten up in front of Congress and said that he wasn't a revolutionary anymore? Well, I guess now suddenly he was the leader of the Communist Party. And William Z. Foster became the leader of the Communist Party. And the Communist Party was under heavy attack by the FBI. A lot of leaders of the Communist Party were arrested and all of that. And William Z. Foster was arrested at one point. That convention, the founding convention, was raided by the FBI and they were all dragged into court. It was not an easy time to be a leader of the Communist Party. The American Federation of Labor, the AFL, had a convention. William Z. Foster sat in the balcony. He was the leader of the Communist Party and the labor unions of the Communist Party. So he went to the AFL convention. He was sitting up in the balcony. And the president of the AFL, I think it was Green, was his name. What was his name? Green? I think it was Green. Right, if I'm not mistaken, right? AFL President Green. I think that's who it was. William Green. Yes. William Green, the head of the AFL, was giving a speech. And in his speech, he pointed up to the balcony. And he said, there's one man here we want nothing to do with. William Z. Foster. This man's a communist. He's a traitor. He's loyal to the Soviet Union. He wants a bloody, violent revolution. We want nothing to do with him. We're proud Americans in the AFL. Can you imagine being in a hall? Thousands of people are there for a labor union convention. You're just sitting there in the balcony. And the president of the American Federation of Labor points to where you're sitting and denounces you. And everyone in the room looks over at you like you're a bad person. That's got to be a pretty wild feeling. The American Federation of Labor passed a ban. No communist can be a member of the American Federation of Labor. And so the Communist Party and William Z. Foster, they formed an underground faction inside the American Federation of Labor, inside the AFL. And that underground faction they formed was called the Trade Union Educational League, the TUEL, the Trade Union Education League. And they had underground meetings, and it was a secret. They were trying to organize. They were trying to organize a radical faction inside of the AFL. And it was very difficult. And they organized the Save the Union campaign, and they did all kinds of stuff. And it was pretty wild. And William Z. Foster ran for president in 1924 as the communist candidate. He ran for president again in 1928 as the communist candidate. And there was a big fight inside the Communist Party. William Z. Foster's rival, J. Lovestone, put forward the theory of American exceptionalism. Said that the Soviet Union and Marxism didn't apply to the United States. Well, William Z. Foster battled against the American exceptionalist faction, and they were booted out of the Communist Party. And then the Great Depression happened, and William Z. Foster was the leader of the Communist Party during the Great Depression. And you read about the amazing work that William Z. Foster did. International Unemployment Day, March 1st, 1930. March 6th, 1930. They organized 20,000 people to gather in Union Square to demand jobs and jobs for the unemployed. There was a riot of the unemployed. And all over the country, they were organizing riots and hunger marches of the unemployed. And William Z. Foster was the leader of the hunger marches. And he was sent to Rikers Island for a year. He got a year sentence in jail for inciting a riot, because on International Unemployment Day, he gathered a crowd of people, and they were told by the police they couldn't march, and he told them they should march anyway, and they proceeded to start marching anyway. So he was sent to prison for inciting a riot. Got out of prison, and when he got out of prison, he ran for president in 1932. And you read about that 1932 presidential campaign. He wrote a book for that presidential campaign, which is a book everyone should read. This book is amazing. This is his manifesto for the 1932 presidential campaign, Towards Soviet America. It's a beautiful book. Towards Soviet America. It's very, very readable, and it lays out the vision of what the USSA would look like, the United Soviet States of America. It's a beautiful book. And William Z. Foster went from city to city preaching about the need for building a Soviet America. And almost every city he went to, they would arrest him. They would arrest him and beat him up. And he continued. He was arrested throughout the campaign. And he was speaking in every city. He was the Communist Party presidential candidate in 1932. He'd just gotten out of prison. William Z. Foster, it was dynamic, but it was overwhelmingly stressful. It was overwhelmingly stressful. So William Z. Foster, towards the end of the campaign, he had a massive heart attack from stress. His heart gave out. He had a heart attack. And he had to go to the Soviet Union to get medical care. And that was how intense that campaign had been. And he went to the Soviet Union to get medical care. And while William Z. Foster was in the Soviet Union getting medical care, another guy stepped up to become the leader of the Communist Party. And that was a guy named Earl Browder. And Earl Browder was not such a good guy. He was a crooked, slimy individual, Earl Browder. And Earl Browder very much watered down what the Communist Party stood for. Earl Browder was all about the wealthy intellectuals and Hollywood people and college professors. He wasn't so much into the working class base of the Communist Party. And Earl Browder was notoriously corrupt. And when William Z. Foster came back to the United States, William Z. Foster, even though he had been Mr. Communism, he came back to the United States, and Earl Browder was running the party. And Earl Browder was jealous of William Z. Foster. And Earl Browder did not like William Z. Foster. And William Z. Foster was marginalized and suppressed. And Earl Browder prevented him from being well known, prevented him from speaking and writing books, etc. It was all about Earl Browder. And Earl Browder was very much a reformist. And the fact that that Roosevelt was the president and Roosevelt was kind of aligning with the Communist Party, that really got to Earl Browder's head, made his ego really blow up. World War II broke out. And during World War II, the Communist Party, they supported World War II. They wanted to defeat the Nazis. But Earl Browder went way over the top supporting World War II. Earl Browder supported Japanese internment, expelled every Japanese member of the Communist Party, and sent them a letter telling them to comply with internment. Unbelievable. Earl Browder dissolved the Communist Party. He dissolved it and changed it to being the Communist Political Association. And he forced William Z. Foster to announce it because William Z. Foster didn't agree. He didn't want to dissolve the party. So just to stick it to Foster, he made Foster be the one to read the announcement that we're dissolving the Communist Party. So the Communist Party became the Communist Political Association. And it was pretty clear that Earl Browder was getting orders from the American government. Mao sent a letter to the Communist Party and said, the Americans, they say they're supporting us in our fight against the Japanese invaders, but we're not getting any of the weapons. Can you please raise the alarm about this? So the Communist Party published some articles, in their newspaper exposing how the Chinese communists were not getting the aid that they'd been promised by the American government. And so the State Department called up Earl Browder, and then Earl Browder got on the radio and apologized for writing the article. Can you imagine this? Got on the radio and said, "Oh no, this isn't true. Mao must be off his rocker. It's clear that the American government is giving them the weapons." It was unbelievable. Earl Browder was basically an agent of the American government. And they promised him after World War II is over, Earl Browder, we're going to make you the Secretary of Labor. But we know what happened. Roosevelt died. Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened. And the Second World War pretty quickly turned into the Cold War. And when the Cold War got going, it was time for the Communist Party to change its political line. It was time for them to change their political line. Now, instead of supporting the American government in an alliance against the Nazis, it was necessary to oppose American imperialism. Earl Browder wouldn't change, wouldn't shift his line, wouldn't change his position. And so the leadership and the rank and file of the Communist Party rose up against Earl Browder. And there was an uprising against Earl Browder. There was a French communist leader named Jacques Duclos. And Jacques Duclos wrote a letter against Earl Browder, condemning Earl Browder for his revisionism, for dissolving the Communist Party. And the membership of the Communist Party rose up against Earl Browder and deposed Earl Browder. And they made William Z. Foster, once again, the leader of the Communist Party. And William Z. Foster was vindicated. He'd been telling people what an awful tyrant Earl Browder had been, and what a reformist and sellout Earl Browder had been. And he was ultimately vindicated. William Z. Foster became once again the leader of the Communist Party. He defeated Earl Browder. And the Communist Party was refounded with a new convention. And they founded with an emergency convention, and they reestablished the Communist Party. 1945, they said American imperialism is the main danger. And William Z. Foster came out with the theory of building an anti-monopoly government, a coalition government, an anti-monopoly government. And they started fighting for a government against the big monopolies. Of course, that's when McCarthyism happened. Members of the Communist Party were being arrested. But even during those years, when they were being hounded by the FBI, when the National Board of the Communist Party were put on trial and sent to federal prison, they still did amazing things. They ran Henry Wallace for president in 1948. A leader of the Democratic Party, the vice president, Henry Wallace, ran for president. And the Communist Party did everything they could to support his campaign. He ran against the Democrats on the progressive ticket and got over 1 million votes. Over 1 million Americans voted for Henry Wallace. They voted against the Democrats because the Democrats had turned into a warmongering party. Henry Wallace ran on a platform of civil rights for Black people, an end to the Cold War, an alliance with the Soviet Union, and support for labor unions. And 1948, they ran Henry Wallace for president, and that was a huge step forward. And even though the FBI was terrorizing the Communist Party, they still were able to do amazing things. They led the Civil Rights Congress, which was an organization of African Americans who fought against Jim Crow segregation. They fought against the death penalty. And it was amazing. It was, I mean, despite everything they were up against, they were still leading the Civil Rights Congress. They were still running Henry Wallace for president. It was amazing what the Communist Party was able to do in such extreme circumstances. But then we know what happened. What happened later, which is that McCarthyism, Stalin died, the Rosenbergs were executed, Joe McCarthy drank himself to death, divisions in the ruling class played out, and McCarthyism started to thaw. And then Khrushchev gave his secret speech, throwing Stalin under the bus, condemning Stalin. And so the Communist Party was legalized, and they had their convention once again. And then it became clear they needed to, debate, what to do about the secret speech. William Z. Foster didn't like the secret speech. He didn't accept the secret speech. He defended Stalin. And at the 1958 convention, there was a big fight in the Communist Party about the secret speech. William Z. Foster and his faction, they were the hard left wing, the hardliners. And then John Gates, they were the reformists that wanted to liquidate the Communist Party. And Eugene Dennis was the centrist position. Eugene Dennis and John Gates teamed up to defeat William Z. Foster. William Z. Foster was forced into an early retirement. So he was so old at that point. He was almost 80 years old. He went to the Soviet Union for medical care and basically to retire. And he was getting old. And we know what happened in 1961. The Soviet Union stabbed China in the back, cut off aid to China. William Z. Foster was 80 years old. He was an 80-year-old man in a hospital bed. And Khrushchev had just cut off the Soviet Union, cut off China. He was denouncing Mao. So for his 80th birthday, Khrushchev came to visit William Z. Foster in his hospital bed. And it was just supposed to be a photo op. That was all it was supposed to be, right? Khrushchev came and shook hands with him in the bed. They took a picture. It was just supposed to be a photo op. But from his bed, this 80-year-old man, William Z. Foster, from his bed, he pulled out a piece of paper, and in front of the reporters, he started reading a speech about Mao and how great Mao Zedong was. A speech hailing the Chinese Revolution. This 80-year-old man is in a bed, and the president, the head of the Soviet Union, is visiting him. And from his bed, this 80-year-old man starts reading a speech at Khrushchev, honoring Mao Zedong and the Chinese Revolution, honoring the Chinese Communist Party, condemning Khrushchev for betraying China and stabbing China in the back. 80 years old. He's in the bed and he's calling out Khrushchev from his hospital bed. This is dynamic. This is unheard of. And of course, he died a few months later. And Khrushchev was so angry and offended by what Foster had did that Khrushchev didn't even go to his state funeral in the Soviet Union. Brezhnev attended and actually carried William Z. Foster's casket, but Khrushchev didn't even show up. Now, if you look over the life of William Z. Foster, I just told you the life of the greatest American communist. Were there not setbacks? Were there not defeats? Were there not moments where it seemed that all was lost? Yes, there were. But were there not great victories? The unemployment struggles, the defeat of Earl Browder and his revisionism, the building of a mass communist organization during the Great Depression that fought for working people, running Henry Wallace for president in 1948, building the Civil Rights Congress to fight for African Americans, introducing anti-racism into the labor movement. There were great victories as well. And this is what revolutionary struggle is about. There are great victories and great steps forward, but there are also moments of great defeat. There are also moments where it seems like all is lost. There are also moments where it seems like there can't be any possible recovery. But in those moments, you just pick up. You just pick up and you keep going. And that is what serious revolutionaries do. Being a serious revolutionary means that you're there in the hard times as well as the easy times. You're what they used to call in the American Revolution a winter soldier. During the American Revolution, they talked about how there were summer soldiers and winter soldiers. And during the summertime, there were all these soldiers who were part of the American Revolution. But once it got cold in the wintertime, a lot of them were out of there. They went home. But George Washington, he said that what we need in the American Revolution, we need the winter soldiers. We need the ones that are there at Valley Forge, the ones who are never leaving their post, even when it's cold, even when it's freezing. We need winter soldiers. Communists, serious communists and revolutionaries are winter soldiers. Yeah, they're there in the summertime when it's easy, when it's warm, but they're also there in the freezing cold. And they're there in the wind, and they're there when it's not easy. They're there when it's hard. You got to be a winter soldier. You got to be one who will be willing to face adversity, because there are great victories. There are great victories in our struggle, but there are also great setbacks. There are great defeats. And in this kind of work, it's not a straight line. It is not a straight line. I read to you, and I will read to you again. This is what Karl Marx said. Proletarian revolutions, like those of the 19th century, constantly criticize themselves, constantly interrupt themselves in their own course, constantly return to the apparently accomplished in order to begin anew. They deride with cruel thoroughness the half measures, weaknesses, and paltriness of their first attempts, and they seem to throw down their opponents only so the latter may draw new strength from the earth and rise again more gigantic than ever. They recoil constantly from the indefinite colossalness of their own goals until a situation is created which makes all turning back impossible, and the conditions themselves call out, "Here's the rose, now dance." This is what it means to be a revolutionary. It means you're there for the great surges forward and the setbacks. You're there for the great victories and the bitter defeats. That is what we have to be. We had a great victory this weekend, but we are up against a colossal, gigantic foe. And we've got many great victories ahead, but there will also be defeats ahead. But the question is, how can we constantly criticize ourselves? How can we constantly be figuring out how to work more effectively? Vladimir Lenin, his favorite story that he used to tell, this is true. The leader of the Bolsheviks, Vladimir Lenin, used to tell a story that went like this. There were two guys walking through the countryside, and they could see very far away a peasant man standing on a hill. And this peasant man looked crazy. He was waving his arms. And they thought, man, that guy must be having a fit. And they said, is this man having a seizure? They saw this peasant man on the hill. He was waving his arms. They thought, my God, that man must have epilepsy. He must be having a seizure. What in the world is going on? And they got closer and closer to the hill. And this peasant man is on the hill, waving his arms, all crazy. What in the world is going on? Is this man crazy? But they got closer and closer. And as they got closer, they saw the peasant man was not having a seizure. Peasant man was not having a fit. What was that peasant man doing? He had a knife in his hand, and he was sharpening his knife. He was sharpening his knife. From a distance, it looked insane. From a distance, it looked erratic. From a distance, it looked completely illogical and uncontrolled. But in reality, it was a very calculated action done for the purpose of carrying out a very precise goal, sharpening the knife. And that is how revolutionary organizations look. From a distance, it might look like we don't know what we're doing. And from a distance, it might look like we're waving our arms crazy. We're running here, we're running there, we're dissolving, we're reforming, we're yelling at each other, we're kicking people out, we're doing that. From a distance, we just look like a crazy peasant on a hill raising our arms. When you get close to us, when you get close to the Center for Political Innovation, you'll see that we're really sharpening our knives. That's what we're doing. We're sharpening our knives for the fight ahead. We are sharpening our figurative knives with which to slay the system of capitalism and free America and cut the chains that hold back the American people. That's what we're doing. And it looks crazy and it looks erratic, and there are setbacks. There are also victories. And that's what I want you all to remember. And the next time we have a defeat, remember how quickly we emerged from that defeat. And as we celebrate the great victories that happened, and as we prepare for a very important conference this March, at the same time, remember the hardships and be on guard for the mistakes we've made in the past and the errors that we made in the past. Be on guard, be prepared, but never lose sight. Never lose sight of the purpose. Never lose sight of the final goal. Folks, if you've ever ridden on a boat, one of the problems on a boat is called seasickness. Seasickness, right? Because you're flipping and flopping and you get sick to your stomach. What do they tell people when they're seasick? What do they tell people? If you're seasick, you're on a boat and you're seasick and you're getting sick to your stomach, and what do you do? What do you do if you're seasick on a boat? And they say you should look at the one thing that doesn't move. The boat is moving. When you're on a boat, there's one thing that doesn't move. That's the horizon. The horizon stays still. So if you're seasick, look at the horizon. Keep your eyes on the horizon in order to keep your sanity, in order to keep yourself together. You're starting to feel seasick, look at the horizon. Our horizon is our goal. The defeat of American imperialism. The rebirth of America as a socialist society. Keep your eye on the horizon. If you're starting to get seasick, you're starting to be so demoralized and upset by how erratic everything seems, keep your eye on our horizon. Keep your eye on the great horizon that we have ahead of us. Let our goal be your horizon. That's how you'll get through this. It was the revisionists. They're the ones who said the movement is everything and the goal is nothing. That's what the revisionists said. That's what Edward Bernstein said. Fuck that. The goal is everything, and the movement is simply an end to reach the goal. This is all about the goal, folks. This is all about the defeat of American imperialism. This is all about the rise of an anti-monopoly government and a government of action that fights for working families. The movement is merely a means to an end. We are in this to win it. We are in this to see a new society. We're in this for peace, jobs, democracy, and equality. The movement is merely a means to reach the goal. We're marching ahead. And that concludes my opening remarks for tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and let's start. Let's start calling people out as we see them. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who's with us? Make sure you sign up to come to our conference in March. We really need you there. We really need you there. Dropping the link in the chat. Oh, we got the great Ryan in Oakland, the man with the flag, who I'll be interviewing later. We got Michael in Houston. We got John McCarthy in Chicago. We got Ryan in Kansas City. We got long time no see, right? We got Richard Swacky. We got QC from Los Angeles. Neil Frazier in Hong Kong. You know, who else we got here? We got Four Oaks. We got from a quiet holler in Kentucky, Temple City, California, Eastern Massachusetts, based flag Ryan, Cincinnati, Jenny Lynn, Billy in Gateshead, England. We got Temple City, California, Alex from Brazil, got West Virginia, Redneck Red, Nate in Chicago. Oh, David Fox, stuck in traffic in Melbourne, Kieran from San Diego, Patch in Arizona, Bob Troy in Newark, Los Angeles, Cleveland Pirate Alex. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Mindanao to Midwest Lumpia Logic, Auckland, New Zealand, the Shenyang cult from Canada. A cult? That's scary. We don't allow that here. Auckland, New Zealand, Micah from Las Vegas, Killian from Milwaukee, Zambia, currently in China. Welcome, welcome. Amical, Cape Verde. Very, very good. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Micah from Las Vegas. Sup, comrades. Mad Cow NBC Studios. Ba-dum-bum. Anthony in Texas. Edward can feel the revolution igniting. Very, very good. Sage in Milwaukee. John Whitty in Houston. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, we got a super chat here from Jim Garrison. Thank you very much, Jim, on the Rockfin. Shout out to you. We got Buttercup Taylor in California. Ventos, the Shadowy Wizard Money Gang. That's interesting. Shadowy Wizard Money Gang. That's a gang I wouldn't want to rob me. The Shadowy Wizard Money Gang. I wouldn't want to get robbed by them. That's wild. That's wild. Anyone else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Back in Ludlow. Back in Ludlow. Very, very good. Scott S. from Moonlight Beach. Welcome, Scott S. All right. It's a Zoomer TikTok meme, Caleb. Very, very good. A Zoomer TikTok meme. Very, very, very good. Very, very good. Anyone else? Names and locations? If not, we'll start answering super chats. Call out Funky Lollipop. Yeah, we met Funky Lollipop this weekend. She's really cool. That's really cool. We also met Ellie in Chicago. Ellie is a good friend of ours. Good to meet her. Elliot in Texas. Thanks for the Foster story. You're very, very welcome. You're very, very, very welcome. Yeah, Funky Lollipop. So good to talk to you. You're cool, and it was really good to meet you. This is us right here. What is it? But what is it? I'm scared to click the link. I'm scared to click the link. But how to start a movement, right? How to start a movement, right? I've seen this video. Tyler has shown me that video. Very good, very good. Maybe we'll since that's a super chat, maybe we'll reference that. How to start a movement. How to start a movement. All righty. See if I can figure that one out. All right. But yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Dum-dum, dum-dum. All right. So how to start a movement. I'll see if I can get that video to load. Tyler showed me that video. I had not seen it before. It's one of those TED Talks. That's okay. That's okay. I will see about that video. Thank you, Lori, for the video. Thank you. And How to Start a Movement by Derek Silvers. Very, very good. So we got that clip parsing as we speak. Very, very good. Very, very good. Oh, Funky Lollipop is here to get the shout out. Welcome, Funky. Welcome, welcome. All right. So we got a few super chats here. All right. How to start a movement. How to start a movement. All righty. Very good. So the first one I've got is Moldova situation. I don't know enough about it, honestly. I can't comment on the Moldova situation. I'm sorry. Have I read Thus Spake Zarathustra? The answer is yes. Yes, I have. You know, at the time that I read Friedrich Nietzsche's book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, I found it very inspiring because it seemed to be kind of an ode to the nonconformist. You know, it was an ode to those who don't go along with society, those who challenge social norms. And as somebody who's felt like the odd guy out and someone who's felt like a nonconformist for most of my life, I found it very inspiring. And there's a quote from that book that I frequently use. I still use it. One must be filled with chaos to give birth to a dancing star. But ultimately, the Nietzschean philosophy is very toxic. The Nietzschean philosophy is radical liberalism and anti-communism. It is a destruction of morality and a destruction of reason. And if you really want to know what Nietzsche is all about and why it's not good, read The Destruction of Reason by George Lukács. Nietzschean philosophy is really the ruling ideology of the world we live in. It's called philosophical irrationalism. It's Ayn Rand. It's the Church of Satan. It's the belief that morality is for the weak. It's dangerous, evil stuff. But that particular book that I've got on the shelf over there, Thus Spake Zarathustra, it is appealing to the nonconformist, right? It's a prophet is sent to earth to announce the death of God and to espouse all of Nietzsche's teachings. And there's a lot about the last man, right? The last man is the conformist, the person who just goes along with society, but the great Ubermensch or whatever is one who makes his own rules and challenges social order and stuff. I mean, it's kind of an ode to the nonconformist. And I liked it at the time that I read it when I was a college student. It made sense to me because, I was not one of a conforming type. And that's one of the problems with the more effective forms of anti-communism. You read George Orwell's 1984. You read Anthem by Ayn Rand. These books are an attempt to appeal to the nonconformist because in our society, that's who becomes communist is nonconformist. So they sell anti-communism to the nonconformists. Thoughts on the Shen Yu theater play that idealizes China before communism? There you go. Talk about that. I've seen that billboard so many places. Get started on that. I'll talk about that. I got plenty to say about that, Julia. No worries. All right. So there we go. All right. Libertarians say the Bolshevik Revolution was funded by the Rockefellers and Wall Street financial interests. Is that true? It is not true. And that I have done a lot to debunk that lie. That lie is rooted in anti-Semitism. And the more you look into the people who claim to give evidence of that, the more you will see that basically, it all revolves around a guy named Jacob Schiff. Right? There was a Wall Street banker named Jacob Schiff. Jacob Schiff, you can look him up. He was a very wealthy man on Wall Street who was a Zionist. He was a big supporter of Israel, and he was Jewish, and he was very much opposed to the Russian government. He didn't like the Tsar. He hated Russia because of Russia's anti-Semitism. So he funded Japan to fight Russia, and he gave the Emperor of Japan a bunch of money to fight Russia in the Russian-Japanese War. And he very much wanted to overthrow the Tsar because he saw the Tsar as incompetent and losing World War I, and because he also, saw the Tsar as very anti-Semitic. There is no evidence that Jacob Schiff supported the Bolsheviks. Jacob Schiff was very much an anti-communist. He was just anti-Tsar. And you have to remember, the Tsar was toppled in February of 1917. The Bolsheviks didn't take power until October of 1917. And the Bolsheviks took power to end Russia's involvement in World War I. Jacob Schiff was a big supporter of U.S. involvement and Russian involvement in World War I. So it doesn't line up. But they always point to the fact that Jacob Schiff, and that it is true, it is absolutely true, that Jacob Schiff gave a lot of money, and he did, Jacob Schiff gave a lot of money. He gave a lot of money to an organization called the Russian Freedom Group. and Russian Freedom Group was against the Tsar, and it was against the Tsar, and you know, it was against the Tsar, and he was against the Tsar, and that's not the same thing as bringing the Bolsheviks to power. The Bolsheviks took power after the Tsar had been toppled. So there you go. There you go. Ugh, sorry. Just have to deal with some stuff right now. Ugh. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry, I just have to deal with something right now. Sorry about that. All right. Anyhow, drama. Not a fan of drama. But anyway, I'm sorry, there was a super chat here. Please explain the difference between modern American neoliberal capitalism and the form of capitalism that preceded it. Very good. Very good. Very good. All righty. So, yeah, that's called, and I actually made a video refuting this lie, this notion that the Bolshevik Revolution was some kind of Wall Street conspiracy. There's a lot written about it, but it all kind of revolves around the conspiracy theory involving Jacob Schiff. So there you go. And let me see if I can find that. I made a video about that topic because it's not helpful. And it's a common lie, but the more you dig into it, if you actually know the details, it's clearly, it's just not true. And yeah, I'll link the video that I made on that. That the Tsar and his anti-Semitism, and the Tsar and his government was one thing, and there were many within the capitalist class who wanted to overthrow the Tsar. But there you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. All righty. That's the video that I just linked you there. So there you go. Anyhow, next point. Did I see Sabi Sobs with World Socialist Website, Jason Unruhe, and Max Blumenthal? I saw some of that, I don't know. I mean, the World Socialist Website, the way that they witch hunted the rally, that was awful. It was awful. And, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, Did I see Max Blumenthal? The controversy about the flag. Again, we've addressed that, and it's just, come on. The internet is so intended to divide people against each other, and so intended to incite people against each other. It's really unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate, and the amount of people, I mean, it's just like people fall for this. And that's the problem, is the internet is very good at like getting people's goat, and, you just have to just keep going, because people that will fall for that, you just have to move on from. So, look, I don't care. I really don't care. I have been canceled so many times. And, I mean, people want to put stuff out there and stuff starts floating around, and, it's just childish, and it's stupid. It's stupid. And I mean, Jason, why does anyone pay attention to what Jason says about anything? I mean, it's like I could start about that, watch our debate and watch how cringe that was, and, I have a lot of respect for Max. He does great work, and I'm disappointed by some of the things he said, and we've responded. We've given our response, and I wish everyone could just all just get along. That's what I would like, and I wish that people could be mature about things, and that, the innuendo that's out there, and, but that's really expecting a lot of people, and we just keep going. I mean, that's all we do, is we just keep going. Yeah, that's what we do. We just keep going. And look, I mean, you can't please people. You really can't please people. So yeah, there you go. All righty. Next point. Market socialism in China versus Yugoslavia. In Yugoslavia, they called it workers' self-management. And the way it was run was that it was basically, it was workers' self-management. I don't know what to say about it. It was like every factory was autonomous. They sold their goods to the government. The factories were set up kind of like collective farms. In the Soviet Union, the collective farms were not like state industries. You didn't get a wage there. It was they produced so much wheat, or they produced so much grain, and then the Soviet state bought the wheat and grain from the farm. And the way that worker self-management under Tito and Yugoslavia was set up, every factory, if they made tires, they would then sell the tires they made to the government, and the government would pay the factory for how many tires they produced. And they presented it as being more radically socialist, because look, the workers are the direct owners of the factory. They get a share. They produce so many tires. They sell them to the state. They elect their management. They run the factory themselves. They presented it as being more radically socialist. But it was, in a way, it was more of a market incentive. I mean, they were incentivized, first of all, to produce as much as they possibly could because they'd get paid more. And, factories would compete with each other. And there were elements. It was a market. And they presented it in kind of a very radical way. A lot of Trotskyites got very excited by those events. But, that's what happened. So there's that. And then on top of that, you had in China, they started out doing things like that. During the Cultural Revolution, there were things like that went on. I've talked a lot about the 3-in-1 combination that was implemented during the Cultural Revolution. And on top of that, there was also something similar. There was like the what do you call it? There was like factory autonomy and stuff. But ultimately, in the Soviet Union or in China, the way that they started implementing market socialism was they just had market zones, and they had, state-run enterprises that were joint ventures with foreign investors. They had market zones. They created private corporations like Huawei Technologies. It's a very different kind of thing. It's not just like factory autonomy. It's a very different kind of thing. So there's some pretty clear differences. In China, you have a much bigger market sector. It's blatantly a market sector. I mean, it's private companies that exist and make profit and have employees and all of that. The market sector that exists in China is much more of a market. So there you go. Soviet hammer and sickle and the Chinese flag are proof that class collaboration is necessary to win. Well, what does class collaboration mean? Right? That's where it gets all tricky, because like class collaborationism in the union sense, right? It means that they don't want like a confrontation with the ruling class, right? That's what that means, right? And it means like kind of reformist labor unionism. But in the context of like a socialist revolution, it means you have a government that is kind of a coalition. It's kind of a coalition, and as kind of a coalition, this government, it has figures from other classes. It kind of takes power on behalf of a coalition that takes power and starts implementing socialism. And that's always how it's been. Every socialist society that's ever existed has represented a coalition, but at the center of that coalition is the working class, the proletariat. So there you go. Strengths and weaknesses of Huey Newton. Well, ultimately, I know at the time of his death, Huey Newton, it's understood he was involved in drugs. There were some drug addiction issues at the time of his death. That's obviously a weakness. The other thing that I understand about, Huey Newton is that, look, I honestly don't even really, the strengths of Huey Newton were that he was theoretically very adept. And his theory of intercommunalism and his understanding of, his concept of survival pending revolution, his concepts of intercommunalism, All of that was really, really important stuff. And that was really, really deep. And the fact that he developed the Black Panther Party as an organization, and he figured out how to make them into a massive organization and how to make them grow very quickly and grab attention, the armed patrols, all the tactics the Black Panthers did, the free breakfast program, the armed patrols, all of that was the mind of Huey Newton. You know, and that was Huey Newton who developed that. And that was great. And that was brilliant. His weaknesses, there are other things that are stated to be his weaknesses. You know, and I don't know. There's a lot of rumors and innuendo, and you don't want to necessarily repeat all of that. There's people who've written memoirs of the Black Panthers and accused him of very extreme things that I don't know if that's true. You know, but also he was under the gun of the government. And I understand he got very paranoid at one point. And, you know, there was, you know, there were times where I guess it is undisputed that he got very violent with some of the people in his organization. There would be, you know, confrontations between them and such. And that ultimately towards the end of his life, he was involved in drugs and he was ultimately killed. Right. And many people believe his death was related to that. You know, but some people think it could have just been a government hit. I mean, we don't know, but it's really sad the way things ended with Huey Newton. Rage Against the War Machine and Code Pink had a day of lobbying on Capitol Hill. Excellent. That's really great news, John. Yeah. So there you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Lori, I will ask your forgiveness, but I think next time I'll play your How to Start a Movement video. I'm not in the right place for that now. But we'll do that a little bit later. That's fine. We'll do that like on another stream if that's okay with you, Lori. I think that'll be fine. So there we go. The Shen Yu theater play that idealizes China before communism. I've seen that banner so many places, right? China before communism. It's like China before communism, when there was mass illiteracy, mass hunger, when there was, you know, foot binding. I mean, it's just like the fact that they even get away with that. No one will dare challenge them on that. I mean, the Communist Party built modern China, right? I mean, they're basically glorifying feudalism. But that play, Shen Yun, is put on by the Falun Gong. And Falun Gong, they honestly believe feudalism in China was better, right? They believe feudalism in China was more in line with their, you know, extreme interpretation of Buddhism. They believe the fact that women can vote in China right now is a sign of what they call a Dharma ending period. The Falun Gong is a very reactionary group. They cover it up, you know, for the white people who give them money and stuff. They present themselves as just an exercise society, some kind of mystical yoga or something, you know. But unfortunately, you know, to really look at what Falun Gong really means, what they really believe, it's not pretty. And of course, they glorify feudalism in China because it's more in line with their traditionalist worldview. All right, modern American capitalism, modern neoliberal American capitalism, and the forms of capitalism that preceded it. Well, the main difference between neoliberalism and capitalism in general is that it's always been understood throughout the history of capitalism that you need a government to do something, right? The Constitution of the United States mandates the federal government operate a post office. That's mandated by the U.S. federal government, by the Constitution. And the reason is that facilitates the private sector existing. That's why. And it facilitates the private sector. And if you had a private company running the postal service, they would favor their business partners. And so you need the federal government to run a postal service. You need the federal government to run roads. You need the government to have a military. You need the government to run the criminal justice system. And standard capitalism understands that. There's a role for a state sector in capitalism. Neoliberalism is the belief that it's always better if a private company does it. It's always better if a private company does it. Always better. Always better if a private company does it. And so based on that, they then say, okay, well, it's always better if a private company does it. We have things like private military contractors, right? You know, arms for hire. We have private prisons. You know, they talk about getting rid of the postal service. This is all neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is the belief that there's just no role for the state whatsoever. Whereas regular market theory, Adam Smith and all that, they understand there is some role for the state. Neoliberalism is Alan Greenspan, Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman. It's this idea that it's always better if the private sector is involved. Let's kind of just get rid of the role of the state in the economy completely. That's what that is. A day of lobbying on Capitol Hill was very successful. Good. I'm glad to hear that. And again, let's remember that the internet is constantly trying to incite people against each other and divide people. And we don't need that. We really don't need that. And it's really hard to get anything done in this world. And so there you go. All righty. So let's do our closing music and I'm out of here. I'm tired, but I'll be back. I'm going to be back tomorrow with Ryan. We're going to talk about the man with the flag. So here we go. Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.